All right, now we are live. Good morning, everybody. This is Garen from the Great Waunakee Committee, and our next installment for the series, Waunakee is Home. Today we're in for a treat, and we're literally in because it got a bit chill, and then we are all inside our homes and doing this live through Zoom with our next guest for this installment. Just telling a little bit of information about what Waunakee's Home is about. We had this idea of bringing some people from our community simply for them to tell their stories and for us to listen to their stories, find similarities, differences, and just grow to know each other best. So today we're in for a treat, I must say. We have two guests that will join us today. We're introducing them in a moment. But they are here to show us Waunakee through the eyes of generations. And the other treat I must confess we have today is that I invited my husband, Tom Guerin, to be the interviewer of the session. And there's a main reason for that. Tom has an absolute passion for history. So we thought it was a perfect fit. So I'll let Tom introduce our new guests, Jim and Sam.
Sure. Thanks, Sil. Well, welcome everyone to the third live interview. As you can probably tell, my accent is obviously not from around here. Originally, I'm from Ireland, as Sylvia said, and we've been in Waunakee for about 10 years. So I'm excited to listen to today's interview. We're going to hear more about Waunakee's histories. Our guests today, Sam Kaufmann and Jim Koltes. And guys, thanks so much for doing this. And I suppose we might start things off if you might want to take a minute to introduce yourselves and talk a little bit about yourselves.
Oh, I'm Jim Koltes. I am, a lifelong resident of Waunakee, although I had sometimes lived elsewhere. But I always felt like Waunakee was my home and always had my people here to rush back and see. And I worked for a while as a teacher. And then also I worked forever in Koltes Lumber Company, a business here in Waunakee that lasted 100 years or more. I think closer to 125. We never thought much about it because we were always worried about getting there on time and staying on time and serving our wonderful customers. And just a note to you, yesterday I went to Dean Clinic in Madison. And I told the lady who was letting me in that my name was Koltes. Oh, she said, I hope you're related to the Koltes Lumber Company people because I bought my freezer there 36 years ago when I was first married, and it still works wonderfully.
And I'm Sam Kaufmann. I'm related to Jim because he and my grandpa are cousins going back. So we have the same roots coming from Western Germany, and I'm a senior at Waunakee High School. I also am very involved with a website called findagrave.com where I transcribe all the local cemeteries, and I continue to do that all around the entire region, bit by bit.
Fantastic.
Well, thanks, guys. I suppose the best place to start is at the beginning. And we have a slideshow we're going to go through with some photographs of Waunakee, and Sam and Jim are going to talk to us about each of these and how it relates back to Waunakee. It's fascinating, and with that we'll start, as I said at the very beginning, with a quick photograph of Waunakee from 1882, I think. And with that, I'll let Sam and Jim take it away. Tell us what we're looking at, guys.
I can't see the presentation.
All right,
okay.
1 second, so.
Here we go.
Oh,
There we go. Thank you.
we're looking at a bird's eye view of Waunakee.
Yes.
And that was quite a popular thing at that time. Apparently, an artist got to a high point somewhere and drew what he saw as if he were looking at Waunakee from the air.
Yeah. Right. You can see a lot of not a whole lot that's still there because in the 1890s, I think it was 1892, there was a fire on Main Street in Waunakee. So a lot of the buildings in this shot aren't there. But as you can see in the bottom left corner of the shot, you can see the First Presbyterian Church, now Art House Preschool, built in 1878 at the corner of 2nd and 5th Streets. And you can just see how small we really were at that time and how it
Well, I
looks a
don't
little
think you
different.
should ignore right through the center goes the railroad
Right,
track.
the railroad, yeah.
And that's the reason Waunakee exists at all. That when a train goes so far, it has to stop and get some
Right.
more water. And so that this was the sort of limit of a place to get water. So they founded a village here and put a depot and of course some water there so the locomotives could be refreshed.
And that was thanks to a few local landowners who pushed to have a station here rather than a couple miles down the track down at where Mill Road crosses the railroad tracks. There used to be a mill there called Packham's Mill. which was
Well,
very
I think
popular.
if you look way on the left side of this picture, there's a farmstead. And that farmstead was belonging to a guy called Lewis Baker. And he was one of the ones who wanted Waunakee to be located here on his land. And so he kind of put up the money so that Waunakee would be located where it is, near his farm.
And that is why we have Baker Street over there, and the bottom of the shot we have Fish Street, named after George Fish, who built the house next to Walgreens, the beautiful red brick house there. And yeah,
That's
Cool.
fantastic.
I didn't know that about that house on the top left. So moving on, a few more photographs.
Oh, well, this is a hotel that was built on the corner of Main Street and what else?
Baker.
And Baker.
Still
oh my
there.
gosh, Mr. Baker. And anyway, I think it was originally built by a man called Noyes, Noyes. And Mr. Noyes had originally operated a stagecoach stop. Well, maybe they were a kind of a hotel. Maybe they fed the stagecoach passengers as they were going through. But that was a little bit north of Waunakee.
On North Madison Street.
Well, I guess you'd call it part of Leicester, the settlement that predated Waunakee. So when Waunakee was founded, Mr. Noyes had this hotel built there very near the depot. So anybody getting off the train could go over and stay in his hotel.
And it's still there. And on the right, you can see our beautiful depot in its earlier days and wonderful Christmas snow.
Very-
Well, I kind of remember this depot because at one time, a little bit to the right of it, there was an ice skating rink. And we would skate there in the winter. And then the depot agent, I think Mr. Alfred, his name was, allowed us to come in with our skates on and sit in the depot waiting room and warm ourselves between various skating bouts on this rink.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
So on the upper left, you can see a building called the Ryan Hotel. It's 3 stories. It's a little unusual because it was designed to orient the railroad for the passengers, not the actual street grid, which is why if you've lived here for a long time and you look at it and it looks a little off, that's why. Anything else to add about the hotel there?
Well, I think that the Tierney's from the old red brick house on Woodland Drive, is it? Yeah.
Yes.
I think that they were putting the money in to get this hotel going. And so the hotel went through various names, but anyway, was always a place where people who got off the train could stay. And I don't remember anything else about it, but I guess it got kind of rickety in its old days. And the editor of the Tribune, whose name is?
Alfred Ressler, I think.
No, but presently, she said that when the time came for this building to come down, the Ryan Hotel, that they hitched the railroad engine on it and simply pulled it over.
Oh.
And of course, the Tribune is built kind of on that property.
Yeah, the old office
The
there.
old office was,
Yeah.
yeah.
And the
Oh,
rest,
we got 3 other pictures on here we didn't say
Yeah.
a word about.
well, and the rest of them are early shots of the creek. The one on the top right in color, I'd say that's from the early to mid 1970s, and the bottom left one is from 1939. You can see some folks playing ball on the current ball diamond when there's no fence to mark the outfield. And
Well, you know, this park used to be Cooper's pasture before it was a park. And that was during the Franklin Roosevelt area when I don't know if it was the CCC or
yes,
something.
well, the WPA.
WPA came and built this park, and we've enjoyed it ever since. But I guess my dad remembers when it was Cooper's pasture, and they went down and they played in that area. Remember, there was a little island in the creek over here called Monkey Island.
Huh.
And if you waded in the water there, you got bloodsuckers on your skin. You had to pull them off.
And bottom right is 1941. You can see the bridges weren't nearly as well maintained then because of all the ivy on the sides of them, but it's a nice
Well, don't
different
you-
look. I
don't
kind
you
of like
think-
the look.
Yeah, don't you think those bridges are kind of artistic nowadays?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, really. I think we value them.
yes.
Yeah, it's a good example of how things look over the years. And then we have a few more. I know in the past we discussed these guys, and there's some fascinating stories you have on these photographs.
You're trailing off.
Well, he said stories
Oh,
so about these.
well, in the very center picture is the picture of the old post office. And my dad was postmaster, I guess, for about 8 years. And so that's where they did business. And it really isn't very far away from the railroad track. So they continually had to run up to the tracks and put the outgoing mail in a bag, and then the train going by would pick it up. And in the upper left is a picture of, it seems incredible, an old Koltes Lumber Company truck. And I guess they were very proud of it, so they took a picture of it. But that's how deliveries were made. I can't quite see that they could get much on that truck, but they did, and they delivered in quite a wide area. The Koltes Lumber Company had a good clientele of a lot of German-American farmers all throughout the town of Springfield, around there, over there, Ashton, and so on. So they were always running and delivering stuff.
Yeah. And in the bottom left, you can see a nice street scene. Oh, I'd say about 1910, 1915, judging by the bank building, which is still there, the former Main Street Diner, which was built in, I think, 1908, I think, something like that. But it's a nice look about how all those buildings are still there. It looks relatively similar for today, except the telegraph poles in the
Well, you know,
foreground.
that was a kind of a red brick building, wasn't it, on the corner there?
Yes. Mhm.
And even though the bank built it, the actual bank occupied a very small part of that building. And then on the left side of the building, the Waunakee post office was there at least for, I would say, about 27 years. And on the right side, there was a store, a grocery store that I remember called Adler's Store. And upstairs would be the dentist, various dentists in that front room. And boy, dentistry was quite painful in those days. I remember waltzing down those steps after having my teeth filled. Not so much fun. What do you think, saying the canning
Well, of course.
factory?
Well, on the two pictures on the right, that's our canning factory, which employed a lot of people over over 100 years of being here. It was owned by the Oconomowoc Canning Company, and
Later on.
early on, it was our
I
own
think
independent.
Yes, that's right. I think
Yes.
that Waunakee people solicited or bought bonds, and the canning
Yes.
factory was established.
And it operated very similarly to the Lodi Canning Company, which still exists. I think that's one of the only family-owned canneries left in the whole country. I think so. We were one of the later holdouts still in all that, and
I think they canned corn and they canned peas.
Peas, mhm.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
quite a big output, I think.
And a lot of people work there helping drive trucks, work in the fields. The pond, which is now the rotary pond, that was the stink pond. That was where they would dump their waste and things. So that's why everybody still calls it that. And
Yeah, now it's thought to be kind of a scenic place to loiter by, but
yeah,
then I think you went back with holding fingers over your nose. But anyway, it was a great place for part-time employment in the summer.
yes.
That a lot of people took second jobs or whatever, and came in from quite a ways to work there.
Very good.
And that in 1998. And now that is to Cannery Row Apartments in the Village Center. So that's exactly why it's called that. They didn't put senior apartments looking at a graveyard for a reason.
And I remember when the canning season was done, then they could blow a big sound coming out of that pipe that went up there.
As a celebration.
And it went on for an hour or so at the end of the season. So I guess everyone was glad that the season was over.
Wow.
Well, but now we're looking at a
Yes,
high school.
schools. Yes, we can see the our first high school. Well, we had the first class in 1906 with one graduate, and this was their first building that they were able to have. Which that was what? That was on
1907?
Well, no, where was it located? Was it like 3rd Street or
Oh, yeah, it was on South Street.
South Street?
Yeah, yeah.
Basically where the,
It was just a little bit beyond where the Catholic Church is today.
Oh.
Mhm.
yeah, and in the bottom left is the very first class of students from that school
So when I first went to school there, it was in 1949.
in
something
this
like
building.
that. No, oh, I went to that,
Yes.
the old elementary school there on the right as
In the
well.
top right, which was built in 1923, something
Yes,
like
and
that.
it had 2 rooms, actually, a 2-room school, 1 to 4 grades on one side and 4 to 8 on the other side. And then a pretty nice gym in the basement there. And that was the school. Anybody that didn't go to St. John's parochial school went to this school. So enrollment was not too great.
And St. John's was much higher.
Yes, St. John's, I think, had 4 rooms.
Hmm.
Well, this school had only 2.
And on the bottom right, we thought that maybe it was some sort of like homecoming parade float or something, but you can see on there it says Schwab's Furniture. That was the
Oh, was it?
longtime business that now Waunakee Furniture ETC is in.
Mm.
Well, not the same building. That was originally Rosenberg's grocery store up until the 1970s.
So this is like a float for a parade, isn't
Yeah,
it?
that's
Mm.
being looks like the out where near Quick Trip is now is where it's being towed.
Mm. So anyway, I think this is a nice picture of the first high school. And
Probably the best it ever looked.
yeah, when I went there, they had built a big addition on the back side of that. So that was where all the more recent rooms were and so on. And I think we looked down that we had to go into this old part to some of our classes. And the bottom of it was a kind of the lavatories, I think, were in the basement.
Huh.
And we just dreaded going down there. It was dark and moist and unfavorable. Oh, we got some new pictures.
Well, I put a few more in here. Yes.
Oh, I see.
This is our victory parade after World War I, when all our soldiers were coming home, and all these buildings are still there too. This is about the 200 block of East Main Street. You can see upper left, you have was for a long time the Nolan Anderson Insurance Agency. Now that is, I believe it's a business called Milestones, I think.
Oh, yeah.
And you
that,
can see the gold nugget in there.
Yeah, that's
in the middle of
right.
the screen, and on the right there, that was our first village hall built in 1913. Now that is it's the Silmali building that you see. Now it's all stuccoed over, but it once looked like that, very beautiful. And that's why the big door is in the front, because that was our first fire station. So they
That's
could
right.
bring the fire truck in there.
And I remember that when there was a fire, the telephone company would receive the message, and then they would sound an alarm. So to alert the volunteer firemen could all run to the fire station and bring the trucks out and go and fight the fire. And the rest of us would all be aware of that because we'd heard the siren. And we would run up to this building where the fire truck was kept. And we would say, where's the fire? Where's the fire? And get all the information that we could. And then proceed from there. Sometimes we went to the fire, sometimes we didn't. But anyway, that was the procedure in those old days. And did you mention that this building that was the insurance company was originally built by a group called the Odd Fellows? And the Odd Fellows existed, I guess they were coming over from England, actually, the idea of it. And a bunch of immigrants from England had settled up in a New Dane in a little town called Harvey, just a burg. And so when the train came through Waunakee, and Waunakee was founded, they moved their Oddfellow organization to Waunakee. And they became merchants in Waunakee, then, these guys that were formerly in Harvey. Anyway, the Odd Fellows was the leading social organization in Waunakee, and they met upstairs in that building. And
wasn't when Eleanor started the library again, wasn't that in that building too?
Yes, I think so.
Well, after World War II, that resulted in the closure of our library. My great aunt had a brilliant idea. My great aunt Eleanor Carberry, and she restarted the library in the first floor of that building and spent over 60 years, basically until she died in the early 2000s, as a member of the library board, helping to, and she worked making sure the old library building would become a reality. And yeah, she got national recognition in a magazine, I believe it was the Country Gentleman, for her efforts to reopen our library.
And she got a group of 4-H kids to help her get the library in shape so that they could actually.
When she started working at the lumber company, she did the books at the lumber company for 57 years until she was 83 years old.
I suppose that would have been in the 1930s or early.
Well, she started in mid 40s and then worked until I believe 2003.
Yeah, so she was really very strong on the library.
Yes, and on the bottom right you can see what is now Rip's Bar, and the building on the left no longer exists. That's now their parking lot.
And Rip's Bar was always a important watering hole.
Well, it was always called that.
Yeah, and Waunakee and the family ran it for years and years. But one of the stories that across the street from Rip's Bar was Koltes Lumber Company building, and upstairs in that building there was a public hall called Rippon's Hall. So one time, just before Prohibition, when a meeting was being held there, and the Secretary of State was coming to speak.
Like the actual National Secretary of State.
Yeah. Oh, no.
The
state Secretary of State. Anyway, he was to speak against drinking and for prohibition, I guess. And anyway, a group had assembled there in Rippon's Hall to hear this guy speak. And before it stopped, one of your relatives, a man called John Hogan Tierney, stood up with his gold cane. He tapped on the floor and he said, "Let's have drinks across the street. I'm buying." And of course, the audience then followed him down the steps over to Rip's Bar to have a drink. And the poor Secretary of State was left speaking to an empty hall. Oh, terrible.
That's fascinating. That's fascinating. I should mention, Jim, most of these photos, I think, are actually from your own personal collection, and it's really fantastic for you to share them. So it's really cool. I mean, I enjoy watching places where I can see people marching down the street, and to be able to see that same location again today is really interesting. And the stories that go along with this is all just fascinating. So now we've got a Waunakee school pamphlet.
Well, what is that a picture of?
Yeah, well, this is a school pamphlet from 1898. You can see looks like it was maybe the end of the second quarter or something, because the date on it is the day before Christmas Eve. And it just goes to show how few kids there were around here and how small it actually was, just judging from the number of kids on the pamphlet.
Names of the
yes, those are all the names of the students on the left.
Oh, I see. Well, it's nice that they bothered to publish them.
Well, I scanned. So yeah.
Yeah.
1898, yeah, it's pretty good.
So this is very exciting. This is when we had our first running water. I believe there was a fire in the teens, I think 1915, that prompted a call for people to, let's have waterworks, let's have sewer, let's have running water in our homes. So this is when they were putting the pipes in the mid 20s. And this is South Street. You can see all the work it required tearing up the roads to get those pipes in the ground. And our first water tower, the old tin one, was built in, I believe, 1930 to help service these pipes and make sure we had enough water for all of our community's needs.
I think this was coming in the 1920s.
Yes.
And anyway, my dad said that they had a referendum to see if they would like to have water or not. And all of the merchants and the younger people in town were for it. They wanted water. And the older retired German farmers who came into town didn't like the expense very much, so they kind of voted against it. Anyway, it was voted in, and the first people to pay a lot of money to finance it were these old retired German farmers who had the money and paid up right away, even though they were supposedly against it.
Cool.
So on the upper left, you can see the C.J. Schmidt grain mill, which now looks a little bit different. It's Millhouse Quilts now. And that was owned by the Schmidt family, very prominent man. And he was the later owner of the Baker farm. And
That's right.
Yes, and the bridge, there's a path that goes from Village Homes over to Fairbrook Drive through the woods there. That bridge was for their farm road. And we still use it because of how sturdy it is. And a number of the trees from the farmstead were kept as amenities for the new people buying lots in the 6 Mile Creek neighborhood.
Yeah, this C.J. Schmidt that owned that mill, he was very community-minded and served on a lot of boards. And, you know, there weren't so very many people around to serve on the school board or the village board or be the president. So he was one that was always active in that.
And in the bottom left, you can see another look at a street scene, a little bit similar to the one we showed earlier, except Main Street isn't paved and you can see carriages going down the street.
This is Madison Street.
Yes,
in
the
center.
houses in the middle, those are houses on the west side of Madison Street, looking from the intersection with Grant Street, looking
And
westward.
on the back side of those houses would be the Chicago Northwestern Railroad running by.
And the lumberyard.
Yeah, and in the early days, there were lots of trains running through here, carrying the supplies it built a lot of places in the West. So anyway, some people claim there were 50 trains going through. I don't know.
We
if
had
that's
double
true.
tracks until the 1960s going
Well,
through town to serve
going-
all the trains.
And going from Chicago to Minneapolis, St. Paul.
Yes.
And anyway, if you lived in ththese houses, I imagine you heard the train whistle go by quite often.
And on the right-hand side, the girl in the upper right is a gal. See, this is from the Lodi High School yearbook. See, before we had a high school, all the kids here went to Lodi High School. And there was a lot of pressure once, we had a girl in the top of our class from Waunakee that, we need to have our own school to educate these smart children.
Yeah, and that lady was, the
Flatman.
girl was Maud Flatman, and her stepfather was, I think, I.P. Bacon, one of the big big founders of Waunakee. And anyway, like you say, she was quite a student.
Well, and your dad had to take the train to Lodi to go to school.
And so did she.
Yeah, all the kids here, they took the train to get to school, and they didn't have a huge opportunity to do extracurricular activities because they had to make sure they got on the train back to town on time and run down the street to the station from the school and make sure everything was just
Yeah,
right.
and the thing about it in Lodi, that the high school was on top of a big hill.
Yeah.
So they had to run all the way from the railroad station up this hill to get to the classes, hopefully on time. But they were sustained because when they passed through Dane, they had to stop, and the Dane kids that were going to Lodi High School got on. And one of those kids always had licorice, and he gave it out to all the other kids. And so they had a little something to cherish before they got to school.
Yeah.
All right.
Very good. I'll move on.
Wow, so this is the Camp Indianola Boathouse. This was a boys' camp where Governor Nelson Park is today. Its most famous camp student was Orson Welles. He went there in 1925, and he got some pretty special treatment there. They took him all over the place to do painting and a variety of activities. He did a lot of painting where the Inspired Daycare is now on the former Unkin property, and this operated until 1967 when a tornado, an F3 tornado, moved through this area at the end of Borchers Beach Road. It destroyed a few cabins. We had 2 fatalities from that, and my suspicion, being I chase storms and I'm familiar with this stuff, is I think that because of the direction it was moving from northwest to southeast. It pushed the houses into the water, and people died because they perhaps drowned and they were pinned under all that debris.
Yes, I think so.
And even though it didn't impact the camp directly, they decided that they were going to close. And in the 70s, they had an auction of all the stuff and fixtures and whatnot. And the only part that survives is the cupola up on the top there. And that's being used. It's out near Black Earth somewhere as a birdhouse or something, but
yeah,
it's big enough where you could stand in it.
It's just a remnant. But anyway, this boathouse could be seen from Madison across the lake. And you could say, oh, that over there, that's where the Camp Indianola is. And I think too that Professor Miller, who was the principal of Waunakee High School, he founded this camp for boys, and they did have a very creative summer program featuring a lot of Indian lore, for one thing, and arts and crafts, and even languages were taught. So it was quite a sophisticated place.
And it had a lot of kids from Chicago who would come up on the train because it was so easy to do that, to come and attend this prestigious institution. So on the left there, that is the Roy Cameron Ford Motor Garage. It was actually called A.W. Cameron and Sons. And that was basically, well, now the Quick Trip building in the retention pond is where it is, but it was still there up until about 10 years ago, I would say. And that was where everybody would go and get their Model Ts and Model A's serviced and
yes, yeah,
running appropriately.
They were good cars. And it wasn't it Doc Blake who said, it's the best damn car ever made, something like that.
Yeah.
Anyway, he had it, and he went out on all of his calls in the countryside around here using his car. But I guess before he had that car, he went to buy a buggy. And,
Walking.
Yeah. Well, no, he had it in back.
It depends on where it is.
Well, in back of that house where Doc Blake lived, there was a big barn, and in that barn, he had his horses, and I suppose he had to have his buggies, and maybe in the winter his sleigh, to service all the customers. And they didn't shy away from making house calls, that's for sure.
Yeah. And on the right is a family that moved out to the west in search of riches, like a number of families from around here. Did you remember the name of those?
I don't remember it right now.
No, we'd have to have it in front of us.
Oh, yeah. But I think that he was glad to send the picture back to Waunakee to show how the family was supposedly thriving in the West. Sometimes, though, they didn't thrive so well in the South Dakota and so on.
Yeah, that was an interesting part you'd mentioned earlier to me, Jim, about how Waunakee was sometimes a stopping off point to heading out west as well. So that's an interesting aspect to it. And I think we'll hit maybe one or two more pictures related to that in a short while.
So this is our Volksfest. This was the event that we had before Waunafest. Walktoberfest is kind of our similar event to it now, but it had a nice German theme. There was a run, which is now the Waunafest run. That's how it started. And it was our event prior to that was the Legion Picnic, which was held in the park, and it was very popular. And then they didn't find enough people to run it or something like that. So it kind of faded out of existence, and they started this event, and they did a lot of things. On the bottom left, you can see the depot is being re-roofed for the occasion. And the run obviously was very successful. You can see a lot of folks there. And on the bottom right is the craft market that they held in the village park. And again, very popular, lots of interesting items to buy. And it's quite funny because in the upper middle of the screen, you can actually see people parking on Highway 19 at Division Street there, which you would never see now, but it's an interesting observation.
Well, I think that there were a group of young women, young married women in Waunakee who didn't have much voice. And they were kind of disappointed with the kind of drab situation that existed here in Waunakee, especially no emphasis on the arts. So they founded the Waunakee Arts Council. And this was the result of it, this big festival in the summer in which arts and crafts were sold and showed. And
that's why we have the Waunakee Craft Show today. Right?
Yeah, and it just burgeoned. Doing not only the arts and crafts, but everything. So
Yeah.
It was quite a festival, and it got a lot of publicity. And because it was kind of unique in it being a German festival, it got a lot of attention throughout the whole area. So that was quite a success.
Here you can see on the left, that is the First Presbyterian Church, which we talked about earlier. That building is actually older than the St. John's building that was built in 1886. You might not think so by looking at it, but it is indeed older. And they moved out of that building in early 1990s. And now it's still being used as, art house preschool, which is good. It's still there. And on the right is the Fish O'Malley House next to Walgreens, which was built in 1853. And a lot of people say it's the oldest house in Waunakee, though it was originally in Westport. So, for a good portion of its history. So a little different. The O'Malleys later bought it from the Fish family, one of the original landowners, and it still remains in the O'Malley family. There's a nice Mary Ellen Kearney, who a lot of people may know as an O'Malley descendant. She still lives there and keeps it up very nice, restored the whole inside, and it looks beautiful.
And this Presbyterian church was built, of course, by the few Scots that were around here. And they somehow got enough money, borrowed mostly, I think, and built this church. Well, for a while, there was a little Lutheran church meeting in various halls above businesses and so on. But generally, this Presbyterian church was the only Protestant church in town. And so if people were not Presbyterian and were Protestant, they nonetheless went to church here. And so it survived somewhat for quite a long time until I think now when it has this kind of a firebrand pastor that was able to move to a new building and probably quite a big congregation, I think.
Yeah.
And I suppose Jim and Sam, for me, last week when we kind of went through some of these slides, I like to cycle around town as well and take a look. But I found myself stopping more frequently to take a look at some of these buildings and realize what you guys had told me. It's become almost like its own little history tour around town. It's fascinating to have the history of these places. And as I said, the photographs that go with them, and continuing on with that, these are some interesting ones as well.
Yes, so we put a whole bunch of different street scenes together from similar locations. On the left, you can see, well, it still says bank on it. That's now at the intersection of Madison and Main. That's now part of Summit Credit Union, and that's a small part of their building. And that bank quickly outgrew its space, so they built the building further down at South and Main, which was formerly Main Street Diner a few years later.
Say, I think if you look beyond the
that's a livery
bank,
stable, isn't it?
The livery stable, they
Yes.
called it. And if you were a salesman coming to Waunakee and you wanted to sell something out in the country, you could go to this livery barn and rent a team of horses and some kind of, I suppose, a buggy, and you could go out and to visit the various farmsteads and sell your wares. So that's what went on. And they said that even Dr. Shaw, the other doctor in Waunakee, oh, he's coming up on the next picture.
Yeah.
Well, anyway, that he,
We're back. We're back.
when he had to go out and visit his rural customers, that he rented a team of horses and a buggy from this livery barn.
Yes. And on the right, that's 1920s. On the left, you can see the Ford garage that we were talking about earlier. This would be
You
about
mean
from,
A.W. Cameron?
yes, A.W. Cameron. Yeah, this is about the Quick Trip angle looking west.
What
Always
is
has to
this,
be
a
about
big
Quick Trip,
Is
doesn't
that a
it?
big tree or what's that?
That is a big tree right
Oh,
there. And,
okay.
yeah, that would be all the Koltes Lumber Company buildings on further down from the garage there. And you can see, you know, Model Ts. Not a whole lot of cars back then, but there were some.
This was always a barber shop down in this
Yes.
lower left picture on the right side.
Yes, that is from
Andy's
1941.
barber shop it was, I think. Andy's.
Yes. And that one looks very similar, especially with the amount of parked cars on Main Street that you'll see. And on the left, you know, you can see the meat market, the old diner building, and that basically hasn't changed a whole lot.
Here on this picture on the right,
On the right, yes.
you can see the red brick of that building on the corner, the
Yes.
bank building.
Yes, and the one on the bottom right, that's what a lot of people remember Waunakee being like, especially the, you know, people in their 30s and 40s who grew up here. And on the right, the little circular sign that's for the Hofbrau House, which was in the building behind all the bars for many years. That was owned by the Molly and Stotts families at first, and then the Stotts ran it themselves, and that was
So imagine
people
that,
would dance there, and
that if you would come into Waunakee on the train, you would have gotten off right where that red brick building is there. And then you would be right in downtown in Waunakee.
Yeah.
Well, during the days that the Madison prohibited drinking on Sundays, it said that a lot of would-be drinkers got on the train and came to Waunakee and went to, well, the bars were supposedly closed in Waunakee too. But they found if they went to the back door of these bars, they were let in and they did get to drink.
yeah, that building where the Hofbrau House was, that was built in 1929 for a men's club, and that later became a place called Schmitty's Hall. It had a big dance floor in it. That was our first bowling alley. It had bowling lanes in the basement. I think there were 3 or 4 down in there, something like that. Obviously, now we have Wanna Bowl, which succeeded that, and then it was a place called Brian's for a little while, and it's been sitting vacant for a little while. And
oh, and then in Smitty's time, when Smitty was running the men's club hall, there were big dances on Saturday and maybe even Friday nights, and they were featuring mostly polka music. And the Germans loved it. And even though my brother and I didn't dance, we always went and sat on the benches around the dance floor in Smitty's Hall, it was called. And we saw the polka being danced lively by all the people that had come in. And we thought that was such happy music.
yeah, but it's sad to see that building vacant and sitting empty for so long. So hopefully a use can be found for it in the near future.
Yeah, I'm still thinking, guys, of the fact that you mentioned the livery stables back there in that photograph in the 1910s. It's rather, we have rent a car today and was rent a horse back then. And then to see the change, 20s, 40s, and all the cars appearing, this is a great record. This is phenomenal to watch.
Well, what I would like to see is some Irish guy and his Brazilian girl doing polka in Smitty's Hall.
Oh, that'd be fun, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
I am in, Jim. I am in for dancing.
You know, they would stamp their feet, boom, boom, boom. I mean, it was not so quiet in there.
Maybe we might need to visit the bar beforehand. But
Yeah,
Well, to be sure to go in the back door for old time's sake.
still can at the Golden, can't you? I think you
I
can.
don't know. I don't think
I think you can walk in there because of the parking in the back. So yeah, you can
I-
totally relive that.
I have to admit that our relatives, since you and I are related, didn't go much to the local bars because when they did, they would say, "Oh, the drinks are probably on Harry and on Gar," and so they'd end up with have to pay for all the drinks of people in the bar.
Yeah.
Very good.
So well, we had two doctors in town. Dr. Shaw, he was the kind of the western half and the western rural communities, and Dr. Blake was the eastern one. And Dr. Shaw, he was here for about 40 years. What is now known as the Packer House, he built that house in, I believe, 1900, and that was his office. And the stone house on the middle of the block, just to the west on the north side of Main Street with all the beautiful stone and portico, that was his house for a long time. And he died in 1939, actually after delivering a baby, my grandmother. And they had gone down to St. Mary's Hospital. And, you know, he delivered the baby and whatever. And then he went out in the corridor to go do whatever. And he was, I think, middle 60s at that point. And he had a heart attack, collapsed in the corridor, and died.
Do you think that she should be held responsible for the death of this little doctor? No, you don't.
No.
Well, anyway, you remember that Dr. Blake was
He practiced here until he was in his 90s.
yes, and he seemed to be much more than just a doctor, because he was growing these beautiful dahlias.
And he had the first car in
And he was
Waunakee.
a fisherman going out after those white bass on Lake Mendota. Oh, and remember, he was playing baseball. I don't know what position, but for Westport of all places.
Yeah.
He was playing.
But he basically practiced here for 72 years. And they had a whole day in the 40s to remember him, Doc Blake Day, and they had thousands of people come to meet him and celebrate him.
And if there was a sickness in your family, you just had to let him know, and he'd get those horses out of the barn and hook up his buggy, and he'd be on his way for a home visit.
Wow.
So here you can see that's our busy train station up in the top left, when you can see the double tracks there in the foreground.
Do we see railroad cars standing off here?
On the back there.
Yeah,
It's kind of interesting because
On
the
this
tracks,
what
the
is
tracks
called
are in
the-
the foreground, but the cars are in the background. I didn't
Yeah,
notice that before.
That's a side track, yeah.
And
And maybe they're loading something from Waunakee, like maybe tobacco would be one thing. they
tobacco
could
was a
load.
very big crop around here.
Yeah,
I would say,
a big
you know, the
cash crop.
1980s when smoking started to go down. It wasn't as good quality as, say, Virginia tobacco, but yeah, people would
But
dry leaves.
I think it was used mostly
Yeah.
for chewing, yeah.
Yeah, it was very popular for kids to do in the summers. You know, go pick the leaves and tie them up and dry them. We did that at our family farm in
Mm.
Westport.
A lot of labor involved in all the whole process,
Yeah.
I think.
You don't see a whole lot of it now, but if you're lucky, sometimes you'll still catch a farmer or two with a field of tobacco
What do you
out
think
there.
about these ladies that are assembled there in front of the depot? Who are they?
No idea.
Oh, okay. It looks like they're sort of grouped together. Oh,
But if you go up Highway I believe at the intersection with Cuba Valley Road, there is a field of tobacco there right now, as a matter of fact. If you want to go see what it looks like, on the right, that's we thought that was an interesting picture. 3 Unken ladies with some interesting old hats that they are wearing.
yes. Well, I may imagine they're getting ready to go to church, don't you think?
Perhaps, yes.
Yeah.
And on the bottom left is Kilkenny, Ireland in the 1930s. We had a lot of settlers, as you can see, from Kilkenny farms, right? Of all the streets, you know, Freshford, all the towns around there. That's where the Tierney family came from. We have the same descendants as Don Tierney and all his
Oh, that's
relatives.
right.
Yeah, so he was very historically accurate there with where all the people came from and the name choice. A few from Waterford, a few from Westport, which is why Westport is called what it is, since it was originally an Irish township.
And you know that dear man, Don Tierney, and his development on town, he's named the streets after those little
like Freshford
cities.
and
Yes,
Waterford.
and especially I get a thrill every time I drive through there. Freshford. And did you notice he's called one street after our great-great-grandmother, Bridget, but he's misspelled it and used 2 T's in it.
Oh,
I wonder why. I just saw him the other day, and he justified that as if it was the only thing to do, but I don't know why. But anyway, Bridget Street is there, and here's Rip's Bar again.
yes, in the bottom right, you can see Rip's Rip's Bar in a later variation, and where the auto body shop is, that used to be a gas station. I think Romy Rip ran that, right?
Oh, yeah, right around
yeah,
here.
A little sit-go station was there for a long, long time. And the smoke is probably from our creamery. We used to have a creamery here along the creek. You can see, if you go under the Madison Street Bridge, you can see some stones that kind of look like a dam. Well, that was so they could hold back some of the creek water so they could use the water. And that operated until the 1980s. And they made Waunakees as one of the cheeses they made for the Milwaukee Cheese Company.
And I remember beer case was a popular
beer
one.
case.
Oh, give us some beer case. It has a strong taste to it, so you knew you ate something.
And so, wouldn't they dump all their waste down the creek sometimes too?
Yes, at least once or twice a year.
And it would smell bad for a long time.
Well, you remember this little building here was a seed or feed shop, I guess.
Yeah.
And I guess the guy sold feed and bought feed and served the farmers anyway. And Mr. Miller, I think it was.
Guys, I couldn't let the obvious Irish connection go by without making a quick comment. And it's really interesting to me to cycle around, drive around and see all the different names. And all the names that I've seen, I know people back home in Ireland with those names. So I'm very friendly with a lot of Tierneys back home in Ireland, in and around the Westport, Galway area. I know some people from Kilkenny. I know that you mentioned Ryan's Hotel. I know O'Malley's. So it's kind of a little bit like a touch of home for me sometimes when I cycle around, because a lot of this stuff looks familiar. But listening to you guys and talking about where they came from and how they got here, etc., is fascinating for me. I mean, one quick aside, I did find out that I have a relation who came to Madison years ago and found some relations up north as well, north of Wisconsin. So this is touching home for me as well. It's a kind of an interesting connection. So I'm really appreciative of that.
I think it was the Hogans that came from Freshford.
Yes, the Hogans.
Yeah, and I know Hogan's in Freshford.
Do you?
Yeah.
Hogan Road, right? Yeah. Yeah, that's where that comes from, Hogan Road.
Yeah.
Oh.
So here you can see this farm is now in Kilkenny. It's surrounded by, you have the apartment building there, the Christian Life Church, the dentist's office. That was originally the farm of the Butler family, which was related to some of the people that came from Ireland. And that's a picture of some of them on the bottom left. And the husband, I believe his name was Thomas. Yeah, Thomas. He served in the Civil War in Kansas. And for some reason, he thought it was really great. So they moved to a place in Kansas called Glasgow, which is in the northern part of the state, north of Wichita and Salina. And the farm soil wasn't nearly as good there, but they liked it. Now they don't really live around there anymore. They've mostly scattered out, but they like to come back here and reminisce and learn about their history.
Yeah, I think you said it pretty well that these butlers have a strong homing instinct, and they're always coming back here, one or two families every year, and that house and trying to look at those barns. And then I will go up in my room where I store all my old pictures, and I'll find some of these Butler pictures. And we'll sit down together and try to work out exactly who each person in the picture is. So that is my connection with the Butlers.
That's pretty amazing.
Oh,
here you can see this is Jim's mom was an Uncan. I'm not related to those people, but this is where the Inspired Daycare is now. There's where all the old oak trees are. Those trees were called the Blackwoods. There was actually a school there. I have the old register from the school from the 1890s around here somewhere. But yeah, the Blackwoods, because of the black color of the oak leaves on the trees. And this house was there for basically until a few years ago when it was going to be burned down in a controlled burn, but then it mysteriously started on fire. But on the left, you can see the house in its majesty, and then when it was a little bit more in decline and abandonment.
And there you see old Heil Uncan, who came over from northern Germany. And his first job was on the way out of Madison. What is the way out of Madison now? And It's not Troy Drive, but what's the one?
Northport.
Northport. Yeah, he was on Northport Drive, and there was a guy who ran a hotel and also a livery barn there. And so the old Hio got a job of taking care of the horses there. That was his first job. How did he save enough money to buy a good piece of Westport land? I don't know exactly, but he did. He built this house.
And they attended church. There's the Sanitarium Hill on Northport Drive, and there's a Lutheran church next to it called Lakeview Lutheran. And that was where a lot of these people went, and they would take sleigh rides across the lake to go to church in the winter.
Yes, and the minister himself came out, this was just a kind of a mission of St. John's Church on that would be East Washington, yeah. And anyway, he would come out by train then a lot of times to have that Sunday service at what was called in St. John's, but now it's called Lakeview Lutheran Church.
And the old church is behind the new one. A lot of people don't know that. There is an old church from 1882 back there, and they still do a mass in there once a week, I think, by candlelight.
Yeah, supposedly on Friday nights, yeah.
And that was originally in Westport.
Yes, that's right. Well, and this picture of the Unken house, you can see that the people on the far right there are the workers, and the rest are all family members. And that baby is my mother. Was that baby?
Oh, wow. Wow, that's pretty good.
Oh, we switched to a very nice looking wedding.
Yeah, another Unken wedding on the left side there. You can see there's a street over on the north side called Veit Avenue. It's not pronounced Veith, it's Veit originally.
And she was the White.
Yeah, Veit.
And the Veits were living very closely to Mendota Hospital. And some of these girls worked there.
Yeah, that's where Veit Avenue is, up on the hill there.
So apparently she saved enough money to have a pretty nice wedding.
Yeah, and on the right is the Kopp family, which lived across the street from you on Grant Street. She was widowed at a young age, and yeah, that's kind of their family.
And she had to raise these kids. Yeah, I imagine it was not so easy for her.
Yeah, and on the bottom, looks like some sort of vacation, maybe in the Northwoods of
that's my
Koltes.
mother.
Yeah,
there.
your mother.
And I particularly like that because of that car. Maybe that's one of
It's
the.
an interesting shape on the back there.
Do you think it's afforded or not?
I can't tell.
I think we call
think
them
that
all.
that area would be more rounded above the tire, but it's not. It's an interesting shape how it is there. You'd think that there'd be a trunk cover or something like that.
At one time, I know they said my father had a Dodge,
Oh,
and he bought that Dodge at the other garage in Waunakee, it's called the McQuarrie Garage.
oh,
It was on the corner of Madison and Main Street,
yes.
a building also now torn down.
Wana beer. We love Wana beer, don't we? Yeah, this was the beer made for the first Volksfest. If you ask around, you'll still find people with 6 packs of these in their basement. Where I work at Octopi in the business park, we have some of these
Oh, do you?
on display. We have some of these in our offices on display for people to see from some of the long timers who work there.
The guy that designed this, this was kind of a promo for the Volksfest. In other words, we produced this beer to sell at the Volksfest. But the guy that designed it was called Steve Hovel, originally from Minnesota. But he was an artist, and I think made his living as an artist.
Yeah.
And is still at it in Lodi, I think.
Yeah.
But anyway, everybody loved this particular beer can. So it was much collected. And I think if I go down into my basement, I can find some. I hope it doesn't have beer in it yet.
I'm kind of wondering if there's not some of that beer case to go with it.
Oh, you would like beer and beer case. Geez. Oh.
Yeah. I don't think we'll find any of that in your basement.
No, but I have to go down to Monroe, I think, to get the beer case.
Yeah, that's
these
where
days.
Good place to get it.
Yeah, yeah.
Or some Limburg.
Oh, yeah.
That'd be good.
Yeah, I think the beer case is similar, maybe. Oh, this is the canning.
This is all the staff from the canning company in the 1930s.
Yeah.
Who worked there.
It just shows you what a motley bunch they were.
And a big group that they had to have to run the place at that time.
Yeah. Well, at least they're all able to still stand. Maybe it was early on in the production cycle.
Well, it's July 5th, so it must have been pretty early.
Yeah, and
around tea
anyway, I think they worked them hard. And
This is the place, isn't this the place, Sam and Jim, you said that gave rise to what you called the stink?
So what they did, especially later on where Southbridge is now, it's up on a hill there where the park is. They would take all the silage from this facility, all the leftover corn, they would take it to the Tierney family farm as animal feed for them to eat. And it would be stocked up in a big silage pit up there. And if the wind was right, it would come over the valley into town. And nobody cared about really the manure smell at that time. Everybody heard about this smell and everybody called it the stink. And you would see letters to the editor in the paper about the stink.
Where did the actual stink come from? Was it
The pit.
Oh, I mean,
the pit on the hill.
Was it something to do with the peas?
Well, it might have been the corn and the stuff. Maybe.
Well, you think the corn?
Maybe it was just fermenting up there.
Yeah, and it seemed like there was a bunch of a lot of water or liquid that was associated with this. I remember when they were.
Yeah, you would see the trails on the road.
Yeah, the road was
trucks.
just full of this slime kind of that came off the peas or corn, whatever it was.
And I think that was a big reason why the village board pushed for Southbridge to be built, so they wouldn't have to deal with the smell anymore.
I don't know that. I think people.
That's my hypothesis.
Well, I think too that think of all these workers. They wanted these summer jobs, so
yeah.
The factory wasn't so unpopular with them because they were benefiting.
Wow, that's a fair amount of people as well to offer employment to. I think we got
well,
another, Folk Fest and
concession stand and more of the craft fair, which was there. On the bottom right, you can see that's the National Register of Historic Places plaque, which is still on the depot. They did that as part of the Volksfest as well. And the gentleman holding it is Bob Reeve. He was an aviator from here, and he went up to Alaska, very prominent for shooting grizzly bears and things. And he also founded Revolution Airways, which was a main airway between Anchorage and Juneau and the larger cities in Alaska out to the Aleutians until the early 2000s when it was bought out. But that was a very big airline in Alaska.
Well, just this week, I found a picture of this Reeve he's standing in back of this huge bear that apparently he has just shot.
Oh.
And I was wondering if there was some distinction about that. Was it claimed to be the largest grizzly that it was ever shot?
That's what I heard.
I don't know. I would like to get the facts on that because I want to run that picture in the Waunakee Tribune, and I want it to be somewhat accurate.
Yeah,
but
Jim,
anyway,
he does all on the back side of the Tribune. You'll see the early files. All the pictures that are in there are from Jim's collection that you'll see in the paper every week. And Bob, where the depot is, because it had to be moved. It wasn't originally from where it was. It was a little further down, and they moved it up when they restored it, and they put a new basement under it. That's village owned, and it's called Reeve Park in his honor. And you also have Reeve Drive over by the Piggly Wiggly, which is also named after him.
And this Reeve came down for that celebration.
Yes.
Was that during the centennial? Wasn't it?
I think this is Volksfest because the plaque on it, if you go over there, it says 1978.
Oh, Anyway, he was honored, and he came down, and he always stayed over there at that old hotel, what was then called the Miller Hotel.
Yeah, and his
we
dad
called
was
it earlier.
the station manager, right?
Yes, he
Yes.
was. Yeah, and this Bob was part of Twins.
Oh,
Remember, his brother was also interested in aviation and was killed flying somewhere.
oh.
Yeah. Well, what was this a picture of? The Volksfest?
That's Volksfest, yeah, the crafts fair and the concession building, which is
yeah.
still there, still used.
Well, I think all of these things that are offered here, these crafts, they're all sold, don't you?
Of course. Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure they have the beer as well there in the background. Somebody's got it, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, right.
And I can see the people that were drinking the beer.
Yes.
Who do you think made the beer? I think it was from that place in New Glarus, maybe.
Well, New Glarus Brewing wasn't around.
Oh, you don't think so?
I don't know. We'd have to look at a can and find that out.
Yeah. Somebody else beer that put into the can.
But that's an interesting question. We should figure that one out.
Well, we don't know everything, do we?
Yeah, but we should figure that one
Oh,
out.
we will tomorrow. Oh, okay.
As you said, if you don't know today, I have a funny feeling you two guys will figure it out by tomorrow for sure.
Yeah.
What is
But-
that?
Oh, this is-
Unfortunately, this comes to the end of the slides, and I know from having spoken to the two of you guys before that we could have kept going for hours more, and I, for one, would have stayed hours for more. And unfortunately, you know, we couldn't do this in person, but I know when COVID finally leaves us, hopefully we'll have the chance, guys, to meet in person. It'd be great to sit down and have a chat together. We do have just a couple of quick things to do before I hand it back over to Sylvia. As part of this program, they have put together 5 questions.
Oh, the 5
Yeah, that we
questions.
went through. Mhm.
Well, don't you think we were
the-
much better in the dry run than we were actually?
No,
on
no,
the
we were
recording?
good.
Oh, I think I was brilliant that day.
Oh, no. I always think we're a little more brilliant the first time than the second time.
Brilliant both days. Of course, when we had the kind of a dry run on this stuff, we were able to get into a lot more detail. So, and that's why I'm saying we can for hours
The
more.
real stuff came out, yeah.
Yeah, what's publishable. I got to go through these 5 questions that they'd like you to go through, and you know, just get a feel from the different people who are taking part in these programs.
I still have some hair here. I'm not completely bald yet, but
You're doing better than me, Jim.
nothing wrong with being bald.
So the first question is, what is the most memorable job you ever had?
Oh, for me, where I'm working right now, I work at, Octopi in the business park, and yeah, it's a unique place to work. I haven't worked a whole lot, besides cutting grass and that kind of thing. And I was a teaching assistant at the school for a few summers, but yeah,
Very
an
good.
interesting place to work considering I can't drink yet.
And I think that all of my jobs were memorable.
Well, teaching. Was
And
probably
I
the most
guess
memorable.
I am lucky that I still have my mental faculties. I can remember them all. But I do remember that when I was teaching in Dubuque, Iowa, I had 4 classes of economics. And the best students that they had there took them. And so I worked hard at that. But they also gave me 1 class in social science or social studies. And so I didn't have much time to spend on that. I kind of threw it open to what these kids wanted to know about their living situation. And boy, the response to that was better than I got out of my economics classes that I worked so hard for. In other words, these kids talked about everything in Dubuque and so on. And I remember one girl said that as soon as she got out of high school, she was getting on a boxcar and going out to Seattle. so you see that we had quite a wide range of conversation.
Very good. So what's your favorite food?
For me, it has to be cheese. It's the state we live in. It's cheese. I could eat that all day.
Well, I like everything. I'm a good eater. And
When you're well traveled, so you've had a lot of different things.
I guess but I was not so much experimenting when I was traveling. But anyway, I remember that my mother made delicious pies. And even when we were down at Lake Mendota and Borchers Beach, we would go out and pick the raspberries and the blackberries and everything that was growing wild in the pastures and bring them back, and she'd put that all into a delicious pie. So she had a lot of pies.
And I like fruit pies too. There's an Amish bakery north of Partyville called Pleasant View, and I like to go there on a nice Friday morning or a Saturday morning in the winter and go get a nice, luscious red raspberry pie.
And what about
Good.
when Rose Kessler across the street sent over her cherries? Oh, they would make a nice pie. Okay.
That sounds like a simple winner. Third question, what is a simple joy in your life?
For me, I would say the grave photography. It's a nice way to improve your research skills for the future. And I don't know, I'm just good at it. And like I'm not like normal people my age. Like I don't sit around and like play video games. I just do that in my free time because it's good research. It's engaging. It's fun and it helps people. I get a lot of, praise for doing that and clearing the logs out of the creek. It feels good to do some physical work. I'm actually, as soon as this is done, I'm going to go down to the Mill Road Bridge and go work with my crew. And we're going to get some logs out of there, hopefully before it rains.
That's good. Let's see, what was the question again?
What is a simple joy in your life?
A simple joy. Oh, I have many joys, surprisingly, at 85. But anyway, I can remember that when I was in grade school and I had a package of Crayola to color pictures with. And I only had about 12, at the max, 12 different colors. And I wanted many colors. And I wanted to make my pictures wonderful. So now at 85, I have a thing of colors that has 100 different shades in them. And I still color in coloring books. And there was a class that was supposedly taught, but at least held in DeForest. So I went to that and I enjoyed it very much.
Very good. Question, I thought simple joy in your life. I was expecting one of you to say pies, but those were good answers. Real quickly, question 4, what's your favorite thing about our community?
Well, for me, it feels like, if I do a project or something, I feel like the people in the community, the other citizens will support me in my endeavors and what I want to do. And if I put my mind to it, I can make it happen if I want to. And, you just know a lot of people. You can talk to people. You can engage with them.
Mm. Well, one of the sad parts about the virus is that we don't get around so much. But I think if you do go to Spring Garden, there's a restaurant here in Waunakee, it seems like a lot of old timers seem to come in there. And I enjoy talking to those old timers about Waunakee the way it was and maybe is. And anyway, we hardly have time to eat because we have to say all these things that are running through our minds. So anyway, it's much fun.
Seems like the place to go for to catch up on a second series of this type. 5th question, what kind of motto do you live by? What drives you?
Mine is kind of make each day memorable in its own way. Make every single day different. Make it, when I go to bed at night, was my day of value? Did I do something that was different? Did I help somebody out? The grave thing, I'd say a lot of the days I could put that in that category, but did I engage the way I wanted to? Did I do something productive yet fun and enjoyable, I guess?
I don't know how to answer that very well, but anyway, I think I'd just say to keep going, that every day that you can get up and you can and do something. And well, I try to do things that will engage me, that I would be not thinking, well, what about all the things of the future? Of course, I think of things of the past, but something that I won't be thinking about it. I'll just be enjoying it. So this summer, I was kind of up the creek because I couldn't go anywhere or do anything. So I thought, well, I will go to that park in Madison called James Madison Park. And it's a nice place in the sense that it has a great view on the lake. So you can see everything going on the lake. And lots of people walking through. But what I liked was that it had a scrimmage for basketball. And it turned out that quite a few Black people use that park for basketball. And then the people come down the hill from the fraternities and play. And the rule of the thing seems to be, if you want to play, you're on this team. I mean, they don't ask any questions about it. If you're willing, you're on and you play. And I thought that was great that there was no racism or even no sexism, because one day a girl wanted to play. Oh yeah, you're on. She played.
And I'll mention one thing, if you're interested in learning more about this, there's a book called Alfred, which was recently written by Louise Endres Moore. He's a World War II veteran with a very interesting story from Dane. It was recently published, and they have a number of copies at the public library. So if you're interested in learning more about the agriculture and the farming history, I'd recommend reading that book. I'm reading it right now, and it is fantastic.
Oh, really?
Yes, it's great.
Wow, that's very useful. I mean, thanks for that, Sam. This comes to the end of my part. I mean, when Sylvia asked me to do this interview and we had the dry run, I said to her afterwards, there's no interviewing to be done. It's an introduction and let you guys take the field. So this has been really easy for me. But look, personally, I do want to thank the two of you for giving both your time and the wealth of knowledge. I mean, this is really, really fascinating and I think really useful for everybody to hear the history and what went on in Waunakee, what it looked like. And Jim, thank you very much for sharing your photographs. It's been fantastic. It's really nice. So with that, I'll say thank you guys again a million from me, and I'll pass it back over to Sylvia.
Yes, I wanted just to say a few final words here before we finish the session. I think the entire Create Waunakee community is super thankful to you guys and the Waunakee's home, because our purpose is to bring the knowledge of our community of what we are made of. And what best way to do this by looking into our past and understanding where Waunakee came from. And again, we're very thankful for that. Sam, you are an outstanding individual. I mean, when we call this through the eye of generations, it's quite amazing that we see Jim with all this background, all these memories that you're sharing today, Jim, and then for Sam to have a genuine interest in learning more, in keeping that message going. It is really outstanding for this community. So I think we just created a fantastic archive for years to come about what our history is and who were the people here first. And that's the purpose of this Waunakee's home. So with that, I wanted to thank you both. I wanted to thank you, Tom, for taking the interviewer role this time. I wanted to also thank our viewers that have been stick with us here for a while, but it was a fascinating session. And our volunteers that are already part of the Waunakee's home. Thank you very much for your support. We are now launching our next 3 sessions, so please stay tuned in our Facebook page so that we can publish and start promoting the next 3 sessions coming up. The next one in November, on November 7th, will be with Angie Ramos. She is a Latina lady from our community, and she's going to be sharing some of her background, what brought her to Waunakee, but most importantly, also a recent created page on Facebook called Waunakee en Español. And surprise, surprise, we are going to have 2 sessions with her. We are doing 1 session in English for our community members, but we are also hosting one in Spanish so that our Spanish folks, Spanish-speaking folks in the community can also participate. So thanks again, everybody, and have a fantastic weekend.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Sam. Thanks, Jim.
And I think we can get down to the real nitty gritty that we're off the air.